The Promise, President Obama Year One, is the very first book about the Obama administration, the Obama presidency. There have been other books about his past and other parts of his life, the campaign. This is inside the White House, and I try to take the reader into the Oval Office as some of the most important decisions of our time were being made. And partly through good fortune, I happen to have known not just the president and the vice president for some years, but the people around him. Maybe in part because I'm from Chicago, because I've been covering politics for Newsweek for 25 years. But I go way back with these folks, so it wasn't as hard as it might have been for some other people to get access to them, to find out things that have not been published anywhere else. I met Barack Obama in 2002, and I knew pretty quickly that he was going to be a major star in our politics. In 2004, I wrote the very first magazine cover story that was written about him in 2004 for Newsweek. So I was following him very closely, interviewing him pretty consistently, and I guess it would have been in maybe in 2007 that I first thought, you know, I'm going to write a book about him. And I decided later in the process, after he was elected, that there were already going to be enough campaign books and books about his past, and that what I wanted to do was to write real-time history, hidden history, the stuff that, you know, is very hard to get for daily or weekly reporters at the time, but that an author can go back a few weeks or months later and find out what really happened, because there's always a backstory to any major event or decision. You're not getting the whole story at first. And so for me, it was piercing the mystery of this exciting new administration. And we knew it was historic from the start. I knew I could make a pretty good guess that the first year would be historic. I underestimated how momentous it would be, how much Obama would try to do at once, and also how difficult it would be, which of course makes it a more interesting story. I'm not sure that anything is going to be shocking, and I'm a little bit leery of that idea anyway. Shocking revelations. It's not like there's a completely different Barack Obama that you learn about from reading the book. But you do see him at work and off hours in much greater detail than he's been portrayed before in terms of the way he makes decisions, the way he operates, and you know, the way he relaxes, trash talks with his friends, and what his sense of humor is like. In terms of big revelations in the book, I'd say the two biggest, and there are a lot of them, I do have to say, would be first that there was a very tense confrontation between the president and the military over what the White House considered to be insubordination in the Pentagon. And the president dressed down Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in terms that were sharper than any used by a president with the military since Harry Truman fired Douglas MacArthur more than 50 years ago. So this was a very tense confrontation. Nothing came out at the time about it. He said that he was, quote, extremely unhappy with the Pentagon's behavior, that he needed to know, quote, here and now that they would change their conduct and stop jamming, undermining, boxing him in on policy toward Afghanistan. And Admiral Mullen left the meeting chagrined, as he described it. He and General Petraeus felt there had been a misunderstanding, that it had all been a misunderstanding. The White House accepted their assurances that they would be loyal and that they would no longer try to manipulate the president in public, and they patched up their relationship. But nothing about this had come out at all last October when this took place. I'd say the other big sort of thematic story that runs through the book is that the president pushed health care reform, major health care reform in 2009, over the objections of everybody who worked for him. It was over Joe Biden's objection, Rahm Emanuel's objection. Rahm Emanuel told me, I begged, quote, I begged the president not to do this, unquote. David Axelrod objected. The chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, Chairwoman Christina Romer, objected. They all felt that health care reform was a good idea, but that in the middle of a very deep and frightening recession, that it was not something that he needed to do in year one. He felt very strongly that he needed to. When I asked him in the interview that I did with the president, so why'd you do it? He said, if I didn't do it in the first year, it wouldn't happen. So he felt like it was now or never for health care reform, and he pushed forward alone. In 2006, I had a book come out called The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. And after it came out in paperback, President-elect Obama went on 60 Minutes and he was asked, what are you reading? And he said, well, I'm reading about Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 and his transition. And so the press then went to the Obama transition team and said, well, what books is he talking about? And the answer was my book, The Defining Moment, and one other. And so, you know, I knew at that point that he was at least thinking a lot about the comparisons between himself and Roosevelt. And when I interviewed him later, you know, he was very careful to say, look, I'm not comparing myself to Franklin Roosevelt. But his predicament was quite similar. What was different was Roosevelt was trying to get us out of a depression, and Obama was trying to prevent us from falling into a depression. And a lot of my book is about how did he do that? How did he keep us out of the ditch or drive us out of the ditch? We were losing 750,000 jobs a month when Obama took office, and we're now not losing any. So we still have a ways to go, but part of the story is, you know, which things did he do that were similar to what we did during the Depression, and which ways did he go that were different. A book that I read in high school that was very influential for me is called The Best and the Brightest by David Halberstam. And then I was also very influenced by the work of Robert Caro on Lyndon Johnson, and of course Arthur Schlesinger and Jeffrey Ward, and so many of the people I read when I was doing my research on Franklin Roosevelt. And so I've been interested in reading about all these presidents, and then I sort of made my own debut writing about presidents with The Defining Moment about Franklin Roosevelt. And I said to myself, okay, I've been kind of studying past presidents. How about trying to combine journalism and history? Blend what I've devoted my career to what I like to read about, and see if I can do something new with the intersection of journalism and history. So the book's all written in the past tense, like history, and I don't try to introduce myself into it as a character. I'm trying as best as I can to write this as history, and the kind of history that I love so much and that drew me to books. And now, my perspective has not been deepened by time, so a lot in the book will be subject to further research. There will be dozens or hundreds of books written about Barack Obama, and the original proprietor of the company that I work for, the Washington Post Company, which owns Newsweek, Philip Graham, said that journalism is the first rough draft of history. And I kind of think of this book as the second draft. And there are going to be a lot more drafts to come. But at least I can give people some melding of journalism and history on which to try to make their judgments. And if even, you know, a few kids, just today I got some in the mail, some papers that some kids at a school in New York wrote about Franklin Roosevelt in the defining moment, which they'd been assigned in school. If just a few kids are someday assigned to read this Obama book in school, it'll all be worth it for me. People get their gratification in different ways. For me, it's if somebody sometimes says, you know what, this just gave me a little bit more insight into what was happening at one of the most momentous times in our history.